morning, students. This is Sampat Bhadu, Assistant Professor of English, Govt College, Dungargarh, Bikaner. Today we are going to take up the poem Ecology, composed by A.K. Ramanujan. Let's first of all discuss about the poet A.K. Ramanujan. Actually, A.K. Ramanujan belongs to India. He is an Indian poet. He was a playwright, folklorist, philologist, translator, and bilingual poet who wrote both in English and Kannada. Even though he moved to the United States of America, his poetry is primarily based on his Indian experiences and sensibility. He constantly harks back to his memories of family, local places, images, beliefs, and history, things that remind him of home. The present poem, Ecology, is deeply rooted in the traditions of India, to which the poet is very much attached. He realizes that with all the separation from the country in terms of his physical distance, the attachment is in fact getting even stronger than it used to be. The poem shows how the mother would not like the typical champak tree to be cut down even though they give her a migraine. After the first rains, the strong fragrance of the pollen wafts in the air, making his mother very uncomfortable. Though the poet dislikes her aversion to cutting down the trees, he is aware of the feeling of home that it gives him every time he comes back from America. Actually, Ramanujan was settled in Chicago, America. Let's first of all now take up the first stanza. The day after the first rain, for years I would come home in a rage, for I could see from a mile away our three red champak trees had done it again. This is the first stanza of the poem Ecology, written by A.K. Ramanujan. The poem depicts poet's eco-critical perspective. Here the poet presents the conflict between his anthropocentric view and his mother's biocentric view. In the given stanza, the poet mentions the champak tree, which creates problem every year in monsoon. I think we should discuss about the title of the poem, Ecology. That what is ecology? Ecology is basically the study of the organisms and their relationship with other organisms and the environment in which they live, or the surrounding by which they are surrounded. So basically, in simple terms, we can say this is a relationship between the living beings and the non-living things, or the environment. So here there are two perspectives. One is negative perspective, the other one is positive perspective. One is anthropocentric view, and on the other hand there is biocentric view. Anthropocentric view is held by the poet himself, A.K. Ramanujan, and the ecocentric or the biocentric view is held by the poet's mother. So there is a conflict between the two views. Let's study and discuss in detail these two views. The poet says that every year on the day after the first rain of monsoon season, he returns home in anger. While returning home from a mile away, the poet could see three red champak trees grown in his house, and these sampak trees were the reason of his anger. During monsoon season, these trees created problems. When they were full of flowers, and it would start from after the first rain, the line had done it again indicates that the trees had done something wrong again. It means that they had created the problem many times before in the past. But what wrong the trees had done is not mentioned in this stanza. If we critically examine, the fact is somewhat peculiar that a tree, which is a part of nature, could make someone angry instead of giving pleasure and happiness. Next stanza. Had burst into flower and given mother her first blinding migraine of the season, with their street long, heavy, hung yellow pollen, fog of a fragrance no wind could shift. The poet says that during the monsoon season, the champak trees of his house garden were full of red and fragrant flowers, and after the first rain, the fragrance of these flowers spread into the whole environment and gave the severe headache of migraine to his mother. The poet's mother was allergic to the smell of champak flowers and she could not bear it. The pain was so severe, that it almost blinded his mother. And it used to be first pain of season, but not the last pain. These migraines lasted the whole season. The yellow pollen fog is the yellow dust of pollen carried in the air, which is thick and heavy, like fog which covers the earth. In the long street, this fragrance of pollen was spread for the whole season, and even blowing wind could not dismiss it because the heaviness of the fog. Basically, what happens? The poet is angry with the champak tree simply because his mother was allergic of this fragrance or the smell of the pollens of this tree. In the monsoon season, when the pollen spread this fragrance, and due to this fragrance, his mother had a severe headache, and that headache that is called migraine, and due to that she had sometimes vomiting also, and it blinded her. That's why basically the poet is angry with this tree. Next stanza. No door could shut out from our black pillared house, whose walls had ears and eyes, scales, smells, bone creaks, nightly visiting voices, and were porous like us. The poet tells us that no door of the room or house could prevent the smell of champak flowers from entering in. The poet describes the walls of his house. He says that the walls of his black pillared house were sensitive that could not keep away the smell of the champak flowers. They allowed everything to seep or peep through or enter. He personifies his house and says that its walls have ears and eyes. The house can scale, smell, hear the sounds of movements of bones, shoes wearing or falling something, hear nightly visiting ghostly sounds, and so on. The walls were porous like human body, and the pollen of flowers can get in through the holes of it. Just as a human body has tiny holes through which sweat comes out, the walls also had small holes in which, in such a house and porous walls, smell of flowers couldn't be prevented from entering, and it spread everywhere, and they had to take breath in the fog of pollen. Ramanujan, dear students, here personifies his paternal house, which is very suggestive. The walls of the house had small holes which were like eyes and ears. For example, that is, through these holes, anything could be seen and heard. This comparison is easily acceptable to the readers. Next stanza. But mother, flashing her temper like her mother's twisted silver, grandchildren's knickers, wet as the cold pack on her head, would not let us cut down a flowering tree. The poet says that her mother was allergic to the smell of champak flowers. She suffered the severe headache of migraine because of the smell originated from the flowers. She displayed her anger like her mother's twisted silver. Here the poet gives his mother's anger some physical quality. Her anger is shiny, radiant like silver, and she is expressive in her temper. When she felt pain or headache, there was sweat on her head called sweat, just as the garments of grandchildren were wet with and twisted. She also felt twisted like knickers, but she never allowed the poet to cut down the tree. It was a flowering tree, and it was not fair to cut a flowering tree. Ramanujan's mother is of a broader view. She protects ecology, she protects this environment. She is strongly against the view that the trees should be cut. No, the trees should never be cut because the trees give us multiple things. Especially, this Ramanujan's mother is attached with the flowers that are yielded or produced by these champak trees. Last stanza. She said, by a passing bird's providential droppings to give her gods and her daughters basketfuls of annual flower, and for one line of cousins a tower of migraines in season. The poet's mother did not allow him to cut down champak tree, though it was the reason of a migraine headache. She, say, she said that the tree was as old as she was. Since her childhood, she had seen the tree, and so she felt a kind of attachment to the tree. She further tells that the champak tree grew in their garden by the seed which was carried away by a bird, and it fell by chance from his mouth in their house. This kind of event is regarded auspicious, a good omen. The tree was a blessing from the sky, from God to them, and it was a bad omen to cut it. It provided in every season basketful of flowers to their daughters, and their daughters also to adore and decorate God's idols. It was the most remarkable benefit of the champak tree, according to mother, and therefore she would not let the tree cut down. However, a full generation of cousins was suffered with migraine. The migraine was a gift for them from nature. The flood of migraines that the girls got was like a dowry in that season. Her gods and her daughters. The phrase refers to the idols of gods that poet's mother worshipped and which she decorated with the champak flowers. And also to her daughters, uh, and also to her daughters. Dear students, in a nutshell, if we summarize this poem, we come to the point that here, through this poem, the poet has raised a very burning issue, a current issue that needs to be discussed in detail. On the one hand, the poet is against this tree, and on the other hand, mother is in the favor of the tree. If we analyze this poem from other perspective, we come to know that the son Ramanujan is attached to his mother, that mother should not suffer. He is, he is unable to tolerate, he is unable to see the sufferings of the mother. That is why he wants to cut down the Sampat trees. He can't see at any cost the sufferings, the pain, the migraine, the headache that his mother is undergoing. That is why, at the cost of the environment, he wants to cut down these trees. But on the other hand, if we discuss the positive side of this poem, the speaker's mother is an environmentalist, an ecologist, a botanist, a biologist. She looks at the tree not as a tree, but as a living being, but as something that gives us immense things. She can tolerate, she can bear the headache, the migraine that is caused by the pollens of the champak trees. But contrary to it, she looks at the advantages that we receive from these trees, especially the flowers used for the worship of God by herself, by her daughters, by her granddaughters. Means there is a kind of connection between the organism, ecology, and then religion. If we talk about religion, mother is very much spiritual, she is very much religious, because the flowers which she offer in the worship of God, they are produced by these sampak trees. And that's the reason she is ready to tolerate, she is ready to bear the severe pain of migraine. Okay, dear students, thank you very much and have a nice day.